Recently, a number of people have come to me talking to me about ventures that they wanted to launch. Some of them are business ventures, some of them are charitable ventures. And I keep coming back in my head to this Torah reading, to the Torah reading of Yosef and the Torah reading that follows the Torah reading of Miketz. And the reason that these Torah readings are so critical to me is that they teach the story of Yosef. And Yosef is, to put not too fine a point on it, the father of marketing. In last week's Torah reading, we saw a shift between the Avot of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and their wives, into the period where we move beyond the forefathers and move into the seeds of the nation, where we begin to see the proto-structure of what the nation is going to turn into. And that proto-structure is carried out and developed in the sense of three people, well, four people really. Shimon and Levi are the first. They are fighting against Tumah, against ritual impurity, and they represent what becomes the priesthood when the nation is fully grown. The second area we see is Yehuda. Yehuda represents kingship, and they are the Melachim, the kings that come out later in the history of the Jewish people. And the third group is represented by Yosef. And to me, Yosef represents the prophet. But a prophet is not somebody who simply has a vision. Lots of people have visions. A prophet is somebody who takes it a step further, as we will see Yosef learns how to do through the course of this Torah reading. So we're going to go through a quick summary of this Torah reading. We can't go into all the details about everything that happens in a brief video. However, there's certainly time to touch on some fun and some salient points. So Yosef starts out, and Yosef has a vision. He has two visions, and he shares those visions with his brothers. He provides absolutely no interpretation. Now, his brothers hate him. Prophets tend to be hated people. They are loved by their father, so to speak, whether it's God or whether it's Yaakov, and by virtue of that, their peers hate them. So their peers take the visions that Yosef has and they interpret them in the worst possible way, because Yosef doesn't provide any context. He doesn't provide any interpretation. He doesn't in any way manage the message of his visions. So Yosef finds himself sold into slavery by his brothers, who initially want to kill him. And he moves down to Egypt, and he comes to Egypt, and in Egypt he makes a new life for himself, a very different life. But it's one in which he still has to learn quite a bit. Just before we get to the point where Yosef begins to change his life in Egypt, we hear about the story of Yehuda. Yehuda, of course, as I said before, represents the king. Now, Yehuda is somebody who's going down. He's hanging out with his Adulamite friends. He's visiting prostitutes. He's not exactly living a high moral life. But Tamar, his daughter-in-law, who he has wronged, is somebody who forces him into a situation where he must make a choice. He must make a choice between being publicly immoral, but condemning an innocent and wronged woman to die, or actually taking personal responsibility for his choices and having his own public morality match up with his personal reality. And that second choice, the choice to make the decision to make the public and the private match up and to be truly responsible, is what makes Yehuda the forebearer, the progenitor of the line of kings in the Jewish people. It is also the critical attribute for a great political leader. Yosef is not a great political leader. Yosef is, as some people in my family like to point out, the first in-house Jew. But Yosef doesn't get to be the first in-house Jew by virtue of simply sharing his visions or simply listening to and repeating back the visions of other people. No, at first Yosef is somebody who doesn't manage his message, and this failure to manage his message continues in Egypt when he allows himself to get into a situation where he can be credibly accused of rape. And because he allows himself to be put in that situation, he is stuck in a prison. Now, in that prison, he gets two visitors. The two visitors are the famous baker and the wine steward. The baker and the wine steward are people who come to him with dreams. They have dreams of bread being picked at by birds, in the case of the baker, or dreams of vines blossoming into grapes and then being crushed and served to Pharaoh. They want interpretation of their dreams. They want to understand what's going to happen. And Yosef interprets their dreams in their own context. He says in 3 days, the head of the wine steward will be lifted up and he will serve as king. And in 3 days, the head of the baker will be lifted up and his life will end. What we see then is two different interpretations of these dreams, but Yosef is now learning to manage his message because these dreams have another obvious interpretation. The other obvious interpretation is that the baker and the wine steward are referring to the Egyptians and the Jewish people, because Egypt was in the ancient world known as the inventors of bread. They are the people who exported bread and invented the yeast and were the bread basket of the entire Mediterranean for centuries. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't eat bread on Pesach. We're basically having our own kind of Boston Tea Party, but instead of about tea, it's about bread products. But the Jewish people were known for something else. The land of Canaan was known for something else. It was known for wine, which is why we drink wine during the Pesach Seder. So when you look at these two comparisons, what you see is two dreams. The baker's dream is that in 3 days his head will be lifted off. That is referring to the removal of King Pharaoh, the ruler of the Egyptian people, from the head of the Egyptian people after 300 years. And what about the wine steward's dream? The wine steward's dream has the vine of the Jewish people growing and blossoming into fruit, and then the wine steward coming out, the Jewish people coming out to serve their king. That is the other interpretation of those dreams, but Yosef is learning to manage his message. He doesn't share that interpretation. Why not? Because it would make the Egyptians, including the wine steward, hate him. However, he hasn't really learned how to manage his message completely, because while he hasn't given the wine steward a reason not to hate him, he also hasn't given the wine steward a reason to act on his behalf. The simple idea of remembering Yosef and doing a favor for him isn't enough. Yosef needs to learn how to turn his visions into something that motivates people to advance and to accomplish more. This is the core of marketing. It's a matter of identifying the motivations that will enable people to act on what you have to offer. And if you are a political leader like Yehuda, what's key is responsibility. But if you are a visionary, if you are a prophet like Yosef, what's key is to bring other people along. What's key is to share a vision with them that will enable them to embrace what you want and move it from a vision to reality. All of us face the same challenges as Yehuda and Yosef. All of us face the challenges of making our private morality match our public face. This is especially important among leaders, but it is not only leaders who find themselves guiding the lives of others. And all of us are like Yosef. All of us have a vision. All of us have a way that we want things to be, that we think that they should be. But for us to make those visions real, we have to do more than simply share them. We have to make them speak to the motivations and to the desires of those around us. Only through that, only through marketing, can we make the world a better place. Shabbat Shalom.